I think most of you know this already, but we're going live with Shruti, founder of Books on the Delhi Metro. Thanks, Sajal. Um, and yeah, I've been wanting to talk to her for a while. I'll just wait for her to join to tell you guys more about like how I've come across her work. Why does my beard look like a headgear? I have no idea. But
Hello.
hi, Shruti. Can you see me now? I
I
just
can
asked.
finally see you now.
That's
Yes.
great. That's great. Because I asked a couple of people, even they can. So I think we're finally good to go.
Okay.
Right.
All
So
right.
as I was telling you, right, so I was studying in Delhi for like 5 years, and a friend and I, like, we found one of your books. I don't remember, but it had that sticker of yours on it, right? Like the one with the
Yeah,
purple
right.
logo. Okay. And we went back and we found your Instagram page, and I've been following it ever since. And here's the thing, right? This is something that I experienced last year. When the lockdown was imposed, something that I did was I thought that maybe a lot of people were stuck without their books, right? Either they were stuck
Hmm.
away from home, or like for whatever it was worth, they were stuck at places where their books weren't. So I was giving away like some of the PDFs that I've built over my student years as like, torrented, pirated, everything. And I had a huge conflict of interest. I spoke to a couple of publishers about it. They were supremely nice about it, but they were like very kind enough to also point out that, it is a dying, like, publishing industry takes a huge hit every time a book's pirated, right? And in that sense, I absolutely loved your, like, what you started with Books on the Delhi Metro, because it's such a interesting way of spreading the joy of reading, right? So,
Hmm.
I mean, just to kick off this live in that sense, I would want to ask you this: what, like, what was going through your head when you started this? Like, where did this idea germinate from, and like, what made you do this?
So first of all, Sid, thank you for sharing that background story because I didn't know about it. We haven't talked yet. This is the first time we are talking, so I didn't know
Right,
that you were one of the book pickers. And I on one hand find extreme pleasure when someone from comes and tells how they found a book on the Delhi Metro. So that
right,
makes me feel as if they have found a baby that I have put on the metro, and it's like really amazing to feel. And now you're in Mumbai, so it's like probably, and your friend picked it, I know, but I just know that someone had experienced it. So thank you
right,
for sharing that. And yeah, coming to your question, how what made me start this. So I'll share a little bit of, again, a story, and the story is like this. In 2017, I had just got married in February, and we were back from all all the जो भी rituals होते हैं, and we're back from our honeymoon. And I saw a video of Emma Watson. She was dropping books on the London Underground.
right,
So I bookmarked that video, and I think it was the first video that I had bookmarked on Instagram because it appealed to me so much. A
right,
huge star like her, and I really adore her for everything that she does. And she was out there in the public keeping copies of books, and I think the book was. Um, I don't remember mother. It was something related to feminism only. The topic that she promotes a lot, and
right,
I was hooked to that initiative, and I went on and searched what is it that she is doing, why is she doing that, and that
right.
led me to this books on the subway, which is the
Right.
parent branch. And I think it was initially started in London, but then founder them moved to New York, and she started it there as well. So I approached her and I asked her, if I can start it in my city, because we had a great network of metro, and it is absolutely, the infrastructure is great. There are lots of people who travel by metro. Delhi metro is like the lifeline of Delhi, and I think there is no such infrastructure like Delhi Metro, except for Kolkata Metro. And for that, I think I'll say that it's the oldest one, but yet the infrastructure-wise, Delhi Metro is really good. So that was the moment when I thought, and I just talked to a few people who are close to me, shared my idea with them to see if someone would be interested in a thing like that, because the premise was take it, read it, and return it. So
Right.
take it part was good, read it part was good, but when it came to return it,
Yeah.
even I had my apprehensions, because Delhi is notoriously famous for people who are just good at hoarding things, and I
Right.
think all of us are probably that's the mindset Indians
Right.
have, or whatever. So I just thought, maybe it won't work. And then, of course, because it's an idea and I'm experimenting with it, so I had to run with my own budget, or I had to run it on my own. And I knew that
Right.
no one would be supporting me here. So there were a lot of things. I talked to friends who were book lovers. I talked to my husband, I talked to my family and asked them, if I
Right.
can go ahead with this. And they were more than happy. So my husband supported me a lot. And he was the one with whom I began dropping books on the Delhi metro. So both of us on our way to
Right.
office, this was the first thing that we did in the morning, and, keeping copies at the Delhi metro stations. And that's how it began.
Right. No, and so like you pointed it out, right? The infrastructure and everything, and because as a Mumbaikar, I think I have to chime in with this, that the Bombay locals also like do the exact same thing. But that's the thing, like this, that's such the beauty of such ideas, right? I don't. Bombay's had trains since like 1800, 1850s, and no one's ever thought of doing
Mhm.
this, right? Despite this being there, and it just takes that initiative, like just coming over
Right.
that apprehension that people would hoard those books, and maybe I should start it or not. And yeah, and I think so. One thing I particularly loved about the project was that it was class blind, right? Like it enabled people to get books
Absolutely.
who might not actually be able to afford those books, to the extent that I think in that sense reading does at some point or the other become has a certain tinge of class active bias to it, to that not everyone can purchase books, or for that matter join libraries, access them, right? Yes,
Mhm.
Pragya's idea is great, but I'm sure by now someone would have already this thing, or like for that matter, Shruti or one of her associates might have been doing this for Bombay. But yeah, like the point being, I think that class bias for reading is something that actively requires something to be fighting back, and like your initiative was excellent for that. Like, I mean, one of the only other ones I think catches up is I think Juggernaut periodically like releases free books to read on their
Mhm.
app, like, right? And these aren't just random books whose copyrights have expired, but these are like
Right.
is there some disturbance at your end, I think.
Actually, my home is near the highway, and there
Oh,
are a lot of. Um, yeah, I'm sorry about that.
that's perfectly fine. So, Shruti, have you like expanded this beyond like just leaving books on the metro into something else as well? Like, because I noticed some like a post on your page about like a you and a group of your associates at a garden and like being book fairies or something. So I wasn't really sure what was happening, so I figured I'll ask.
Okay. Yeah, so actually, before the pandemic, it was all outside Instagram and social media. Although we were using the channel to move it to a larger audience.
Right,
So, but other than that, we were only keeping books on the metro and doing random, probably once in a month giveaways that usually bookstagram accounts do. But other than
right,
that, like you said, we wanted our books to reach to people without these class barriers, and without this thing that whether it's an English reading crowd, whether it's a Hindi reading crowd, because we dropped a lot of Hindi books as well. We
right,
dropped a lot of comics as well. So
right,
yes, that was the initial idea, that books should reach people, even reach those homes where they are not book readers, because readers, they don't become just like by magic.
mm-hmm.
There has to be a book first which you'll
Right,
read, which will
right,
entice you, which will which will make you see the world of fantasy or fiction, or which will make you jump into that storytelling mode, and then only you'll be a book
right,
lover and eventually a book reader. So the idea was that reach out to as many people, at least uh, excite them with the sight of a book. So
right,
when they look at a book, they should get excited and pick it up, either scroll through it, and maybe if, for example, and this is a true story. When we used to drop books on the Delhi metro, there were metro staff, the cleaning staff used to take the books for their kids who
right. Wow,
probably they can't read it themselves because they're uneducated, but because now they are teaching their kids who are in
right,
whatever school that they have put them in, either government school or private schools. They want their kids to be able to read, because they did not have that opportunity, or they did not have that luxury.
right,
So the idea was this only. But when the pandemic struck and the metro was closed and lockdown was there, and even all of us were apprehensive about going out, so keeping books was not an even not an
right,
option. So
Right.
then we pivoted and we changed the idea to something like that. We'll put out books just as we put out books daily on the Delhi Metro. The
Right.
only thing being that now whoever comments with their interest. So if they really want to read a book, they'll be as explanatory about why they want to read the book, and then
Right.
we'll choose through all the comments. So of course we can only choose one, and there will be a lot of comments, and there will be a lot
Right.
of hands and forth, but we decided that we will aid people in first getting those books from us, and then
Right.
passing it on after they are done reading. So
Right.
we took that role, and we post books on our platform daily. Some
Right.
are for some we do not chase people to pass it on, but there are other books which are BODM library, we call it. So they are expensive
Okay.
books. They are books
Right.
that are we just don't want to vanish. So we take is we take some security fee and shipping
Okay.
charges, so that those books can
Right.
be returned back and then can be passed on to other people.
Right.
So books like A Suitable Boy and Testaments and all those things we would
Right.
want more and more people to read, because
Right.
most often all these books are unreachable to people because they are very pricey.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so like that's something quite interesting in that sense uh because that brings me to my next question. Like, so I wanted to ask. So before that, someone just asked me to ask you about your favorite book, which but guys, sorry, we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be doing something similar to that later. But
Okay.
yeah, but we're not going to ask her about her favorite book because we decided we aren't going to do cliched questions in this conversation. But so, like as you mentioned, right? And yeah, Kajal just says that now the metro journey is heading to move across the country, and that's exactly it, right? Like, I mean, it's just I think in that sense, the pandemic just changed the reach of what you were doing, and like to think of it, it always was, right? I mean, even if people in Delhi were picking it up, they were Delhi being the cosmopolitan city it is. It's not just people from Delhi there. Like to that extent, I brought the story back to Bombay, and I'm sure there would be hundreds of people taking it to different cities.
Yes.
So, uh, we have a question which I'm going to ask you later. But the question that I wanted to ask you, as you mentioned that you sometimes have to charge people like for a security deposit or like the shipping fees. So I want to ask you for
Mhm.
two things. One, what's been your best experience in terms of uh, handling of books? Like, was someone supremely forthcoming about returning the book and like making sure it passes on to someone else? Like some nice stories about that. And on the other
Mhm.
hand, maybe a shorter detour to what was the worst experience you've had on this front? Like, was there anyone who acted odd about these things?
So I have lots and lots of stories, and
I'm
I'm
sure.
going to share. I'm going to share a few. So I'll start with a good one. So and I'll share both offline and online ones, because the metro ones were more heartwarming, of course,
Right,
because you have that human interaction. And these are on the Instagram ones after the pandemic. They are still nice, but a little threatening also, I should say. So in the metro, we had really good experience because people actually waited for the book, because we left hints when we were about to drop books. So it's like
right,
I have just boarded from Mayur Vihar, and I know that I'm going to drop at Karol Bagh. So I used to drop a hint that reaching on blue line at some station which has because Karol Bagh is near where all these IAS preparation people they leave. So I used to leave hints there that it's going to be around somewhere here and here. So
right,
people waited there, and when I reached there, someone would already be there. And just when I picked, I dropped a picture with a hint in the story, they would come and jump at it and then hug me and say that their day has been made. So there are and it's just my story, and there are lots and lots other stories that our book fairies tell.
right,
So I call all of my volunteers as book fairies, because that's what they do. So yeah, so all of those stories really made us go and do it every single day, and
right,
it used to be the best part of our day, because we knew that someone is waiting for the book, and someone will eventually find it and love it and then pass it on. And
right,
similarly, like you said, कि ऐसा होता है क्या कि वो बेस्ट एक्सपीरियंस में when people are more forthcoming in passing on the book. That used to happen even in the metro journey as well, when people said that, now I have read it, where should I put it? So
Right.
we reposted their stories, and whenever they drop the book, and similarly
Right.
now also, there are people who, whenever they finish the book, first of all, they try to finish the book very quickly, and when they are done, they DM us and ask us for help. Where should I pass it on? Who should I give it to? Can I give it to my friend? And even we are very much open about it. You can give it to pass it on to anyone you like, because that's what we want. It can be your friend, it can be your family member, whatever you
Right.
think. The book should be read by someone you really know, who will enjoy it as much as you have done. Please
Right.
pass it on to them.
Right. So we have a comment. I got one after a year of running after it, and when I stopped following, there was. So that's such a sweet story. I mean, but and
Thank
like
you. Who's that? Actually, I said. Okay.
insatiable itinerant. I have. It's I think someone who was really really in love with your page, which I
Yes,
think
yes.
almost everyone ought to be, right? And so that's the thing, right? I think most people, and this is luckily, I don't know if it's just been my experience or like others as well. Uh, I think most people who have found online, who like this reading community, I've been involved with it for like about almost a year and a half, 2 years now, and I still don't have an accurate term for it. But people, on social media who are vocal readers or like associate with reading or are bibliophiles or just in general engaged with this, I think there is a very good sense of civic duty there, or like just in general some
Hmm.
basic sense of ethics, which is a great thing, I guess. Like, I mean, it's just an empirical thing. I'm sure like there are just worse experiences, but we also had a question for you. Now this is back like slightly away from your organization to more about you as a person. How many books do you read in a month? Was the question
Uh,
from, I think, Pugen
it's
1988.
okay. I think Piyush is my friend. So thank you, Piyush, for joining. So I read. There's no fixed number. I just read it on the go, and because there are times when most weekends are busy in
Right.
traveling back and forth from Delhi. So I read whatever I can get my hands on. But on an average, I think I read probably 5 books, because a book takes a week. And
Right.
but I am happy that I read daily.
Right.
It's
Right.
not a thing that I do only when I am free. I've made it a habit, so I read daily. I take out half an hour time in my schedule, whether it's an audiobook. I'm
Right.
busy doing course and I switch on my audiobook, whether it's just uh, reading before going to bed. So that helps me at least read 5 books in a month.
Yeah. Well, five's a lot. Like that gets you to like 60 a year, which is more than one week, which is excellent.
Yeah.
Like, and Kajal has another comment, and now they leave beautiful positive notes in book when I received it through courier, and also did the same when I passed it to the next person. It has added sense of warmth and community. That is so damn true. That is so true.
Yes.
Like this, and that is again. I keep going back to it because that's been my personal experience. That's literally what got me following you guys. That at least it created this sense of community around reading in a city, which I personally, so like there's this stereotype, right? I mean, about Delhi, that Delhi is generally not a very, it's slightly aggressive, slightly of more not a very welcoming city. And gestures like these, or like initiatives like this, just like make it seem a lot more welcoming than what people lead you on to believe. But Shruti, tell me this. Uh, how did you start reading in the first place? Like what was there like a was this just like an organic thing? Did someone get you into reading?
Mhm.
And just if you remember, what was the first book you read? And
Yes, I
obviously,
have.
and let me just like a small caveat it. Okay, it might not be the first book, because when I say first book, I mean a book which you like particularly remember. Like, I mean, I think most of us,
Mhm.
most readers who start reading, they start with Enid Blyton, and it might be one of those Enid Blyton books that really struck you or stood out for you. But then, like personally, in my case, my favorite book, The Kite Runner, is the first book that I remember reading with like zeal and passion, and like it really
Mhm.
like resonated emotionally with me. It wasn't technically the first book I read, but in the sense that the first book that I remember
The first
very
book. Yeah,
vividly,
yeah.
right?
Hmm. So, answered, by the way, I want to ask the same question to you after I am done, because this is what, I feel that makes a connection between two book lovers. So
Right.
please, answer
Yes.
this the same question. So I'll share my story. So actually, my mother is a school teacher. So
Right.
and she's a reader as well, not as um, voracious as some of us are on Instagram, but she reads at her own pace, and she used to buy books, which was not a thing when we were
Right.
growing up. So there were more, buying second-hand books, and she always had something on or other thing going on. So
Right.
she used to, when we went to the market, she used to buy us Champak and Nandan, which got me into reading. Ideally, I basically attribute my reading habits there, because that's when the seeds were sown. I started reading Nandan and Champak and even Greh Shobha, because any story that got me hooked. I was
Right.
a kid, and I was just having a good time. So that got me reading. But when I started, I think in sixth standard, my mother's colleague at school, she was shifting, and her son, who was nearly my age, or a year elder than me, he asked that, he wanted to throw all the books away and buy a new set of books. And because they were shifting houses, they didn't want to get in the hassle of carrying all the
Right.
stuff. So she asked me that, there are a lot of books, and that her colleague, do you want me to bring them home? And I said yes. And she brought a lot of Enid
Right.
Blyton's and Famous Five and
Right.
all those books, Nancy Drew, and I read them one by one. So,
Right.
and then I passed it on to others. So that had got me reading in the beginning, and that had made me realize that reading is really a luxury for some people.
Right.
So because I could have never bought them. I We did not have that kind of money in
Right.
at home. That was only saved for a future of children. So we were studying in private schools, so that was a huge thing. So other than that,
Right.
spending on books was not going to happen unless that teacher hadn't shifted home, and I got second-handed books.
Right.
So that got me into reading, and after that there was no stopping for me, because after that I knew that borrowing is one thing which can make me not crave for books. So I then asked all of my friends who had a library at home or who were avid readers, so I borrowed from them a lot. I
Right.
think even till the college fourth year, I was only reading till by borrowing, and that is
Right.
also one of the reasons why Books on the Delhi Metro also has this borrowing or this passing on the books wala theme,
Right.
because I really believe that you don't need money to read a good story. All you need is that hunger for reading that story or getting into
Right.
that fiction fantasy world. All you need is maybe friends who are book readers. So even now, what I do is I am passing a lot of books through Books on Delhi Metro, but I keep telling to my friends, ki yaar, just ask me if you want to read. I'll send you books at your home.
Right.
And that has been, my motivation, that I had this stranger boy whose mother was my colleagues, all those
Right.
things. So I had this stranger boy who gave me that gift of books, and I want to pass it on. And I want to pass it on, keep passing it on to all over India, so that people can read and
Right.
become readers, and then make further readers.
Right. No, and I mean, so that's the beauty of it, right? I mean, I think reading is that one activity which, like, and like a lot of other ones, but like particularly for this, is that it can't be taken away from you. It's like it's once,
Absolutely.
right? By sharing, you're just like increasing the common pool. Going back to this question for myself, like as you asked. So I think I have the exact same experience, just like slightly different. That I started reading. So my mother's also a very voracious reader, and
Mm.
she introduced me to Chanda Mama, Champak, and Magic Pot as a kid, right? And I was
High
actually
five.
I used to read all of them, and like Chanda Mama used to be that bigger one, Champak was the smaller one, and Magic Pot used to have this story of Lutapi the devil. I think Lutapi and Mayavi was the two characters. Anyway, so that's what got me started. And I don't know if you remember. I'm sure you know of Amar Chitra Kathas, right? So I
Yes,
was,
yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
I was a huge fan. Like, and so my mother used to like. So it used to be a thing. Every month we'd buy one Amar Chitra Katha, and like I'll just continue reading those things. And as I said, like eventually, The Kite Runner was the first book that I particularly remember reading. Like I did make my way through like the famous by Secret Seven and like your Agatha
Hmm.
Christie's and everything, but somehow I don't know it was a Kite Runner which particularly stood out. And even that borrowing theme that you mentioned, right? Like about spreading the joy of reading, that is something that I also wanted to try and do. Like in college, I remember, like I used to have, like I've always, like just, I blow up all my pocket money largely on books. Like that is something that I do. So I used to like keep, like lend my books in college, and I used to have a thing where I would just have like an Excel sheet where you can see who's borrowed which of the books, and they can just like check back and this thing. So I don't know. I think all of us tried to do something on that on some level somewhere, I guess. And I think that I know. So this sense of community is such a huge part of like reading books, right? I mean, that is one thing that I've experienced while running Kitabi Karwan is that sometimes like I have people who reply to a video I make or like a podcast and or like a post. They're like, oh, this really got me thinking about this book, or this is what I felt, and like this is what I wanted to talk about the book. And it's so interesting because I've had like hour long conversations about a book with a person who I've never met, never spoken to, who probably doesn't even know my name. Like half the people who are interacting with Kitabi Karwan don't know that, like, well, it's Siddharth who's running it. It's just fine. It's not a it's just like
Yeah,
that's the beauty of like revolving in around that book reading community, right? That because you found a person who you can interact with about those, right? I think, and books on the Delhi Metro is an excellent platform that way for like book lovers to like unite. Like, I mean, you come there, you see your post, or like when you're passing on a book, you just sometimes, as someone mentioned, right, there's a note in it, sometimes from the team, sometimes from the previous person who's reading it. It just creates this sense of continuity, and you're a part of like a larger society of like doing things, and it's I don't know, it's very heartwarming for me. I guess that's one thing that
yeah.
always particularly stands out. So now I have to ask you another question. Uh, what's the worst book that you've read? Okay, and when I say worst, maybe I'll put it.
Okay.
Let me put it this way. Okay, uh, I have a tendency, whether it's books or movies or TV shows, that if I start something, even though I might not like it, I'll have to complete at
Yeah,
least like
absolutely. Oh no.
uh
Yes.
so yeah, at least for TV shows, I've managed to tame it down to like, okay, I'll just finish the season and not the entire series, because that's just going to be a drag. But with books, it's just unfortunately reached there. And I think they're very I'm very particular about the books that I pick to read, and I spend a lot of time choosing and like relying on people whose recommendations I take to heart. But the Twilight series, I remember, like when I was a teenager, I read the Twilight series and I was like, yaar, ye galat utha li, ye nahi padhni chahiye thi. I wasn't a huge fan then. I'm not a huge fan now, and it's nothing about the writing. I won't comment on that. It just, I don't know. The story didn't particularly stand out for me. I like fantasy. Like, I mean, I'm a huge Harry
Hmm.
Potter buff and everything. It just, I don't know. It just didn't particularly
Work
appeal
for
that
you.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually said for me, first of all, I'll have to check my Goodreads because from the past 2 years, I have been very, meticulous in documenting everything that I have read and which books just didn't work for me. So no book comes. So this is the beauty, you remember the good things, and this is the irony in life. In life, you don't remember good things more, but you remember the bad ones, the bad incidents that happen. But here in books, I think I remember more good books that I have read and not the bad ones.
Cool.
And the reason for that is. Because see, I'll tell you, I am a huge Harry Potter fan, and fantasy fiction is something that I really love. So I remember I picked up in my college first year, that is in 2009. I picked LOTR, Lord of the Rings,
Right.
and I just couldn't go past 50 pages. And at
Wow.
that time, I did not like it, and I'll not use the word hate, but because I, could not finish it, I found the language too complex for me. I did not find it. I could not follow what was happening. Ho kya raha hai in the initial 50 pages. I had not finished it even now. I have but watched the movies recently. But there was one book, Wuthering Heights, Emily Bronte, which was my mother's copy, and I
Right.
treasured it. So my mother had read it, and she has probably kept it aside. But I took it from the dump, and I carried it with me after I got married, and I promised myself that I will read it. I could not read it even after 3 4 attempts, and only I think last year I finished
Right.
reading it, and I loved it.
Right.
And what I think is ki there's an age to reading a book probably,
Fair. Fair enough.
and either you grow as a reader, or the time changes, or you start liking that kind of a writing. So that's why there are very few books in my list that I absolutely hated, or worst
Right.
book. But that said, there are a few, and I attributed their uh, not liking them to their writing, because I am a writer by profession. So
Right.
it's been 5 years that, although I'm an engineer by education, but I switched to writing, and now I'm a writer. So I've been
Right.
working as an marketing lead for 5 years in an IT company. So I know a little bit about writing. So, and yeah, okay, one book comes to my mind. It's Robin Sharma's The 5 a.m. Club. I did not hate that book, but I
But
absolutely did not like the writing style of it, and it made me
right.
feel like that it's a 300-page book. I liked the concept. I really liked, what it tries to teach. The
Right.
5 a.m. Club, the concept of it, those the theory of it, the practice of it, everything is good and nice. But the story is absolutely, I'm not sure if you've read it or not, but
I
it's
have.
absolutely a waste of time for at least 100 pages. So my
Right.
husband started reading it, and I bluntly told him, please don't read the 100 pages of it. There is no use of
Right.
reading those pages. So yeah, that's what's
No, but
your worst, or what's
as
your
a
book that you just couldn't stand?
as I told you, Twilight. Twilight was one book whose
Twilight. Okay.
उसका फंडा ही नहीं समझा मुझे. Like I was never so like so for the thing is when you're reading fiction and particularly fantasy fiction, right? You have to buy into an underlying logic, right, of what the book is
Right.
talking about. Like for
Mm-hmm.
example, when you're reading Harry Potter, you just start buying into the fact that okay, there is magic exists, and there are dragons, and there's like Horcruxes and God knows what, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know if it was me having like a super rational phase, teenage or what. But when I was reading Twilight, I was like, yeah, I do not see like any of my friends or any woman my age making this mistake that oh shit, there's a sparkly vampire who's 108 years old who sneaks into my room every night to look at me, and I'm like, हाँ यार ये सही है, I'll fall in love with this person. Like that I couldn't buy into that logic, and then the entire like so that's why the book collapsed for me. But you're right. You're right. You're right about something about how books are meant for ages. I guess I've had two particular experiences this way. One is with Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. Someone gifted me that book
Mm-hmm.
on my 11th birthday, and I've read it twice in my life. And even though I don't particularly believe in the objectivism philosophy, I really like the book. It gives you a lot of fodder for thought, and it makes you think a lot about life, but it isn't something that 11-year-old can understand. Like I did not, I read through like
Mm-hmm.
10 pages and I was like, yaar kya diya hai uncle, and I left it. And then when I went back to it, I truly like in that to that extent I was like, oh wow, this person was a visionary, that he had this idea of at least exposing someone who's entering teenage to this kind of ideas. The other one was Artemis Fowl. I think I read Artemis Fowl for the first time when I was 16 or 17, and I did not like. I mean, it was a decent book, but I wasn't a huge fan. Like, and I know there were some of my friends who were like supreme fans because they read it as kids, right? They read it as when they were 10
Mm-hmm.
or 12, and yeah, that's about it. I think that's largely one of the things that goes for books, is that your experience with it is also a reflection of who you are as a person at that particular point of time, right? And we'll have
Mm-hmm.
someone mentioning their favorite Shantaram. I've read only a few. I have. Oh, it's if that person's Fujian has read only a few books, and I'm assuming, and her favorite's
Mm-hmm.
Shantaram. Right. Uh, I'm assuming. I'm thinking. Oh, it's you have your class at 4, right? So like, I think we'll just do a couple of quick questions
Yes.
and wrap this up.
It
Right.
didn't
Okay.
feel like
So,
that much we have talked. So
uh,
it was a nice conversation. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So just before we go, I have like a few rapid fire type questions. Okay, it's just basically
Okay.
book recommendations that you have to give off the top of your head. Okay, a book that you'd recommend to a friend who is experiencing some form of romance, either like a fresh romance or a breakup, something that stands for everything. Some romantic book that you'd suggest to a person.
I'll suggest Ravinder Singh or Durjoy Datta's books. I do not read them. I've not read the recent ones, but those were the ones
Okay,
that I had read in my when I was a
okay,
teenager. So I'm assuming, and they are good, nice, breezy reads. I do not
okay,
read romance novels as such because शादी के बाद वो सब होता नहीं है, तो वो अपना हो गया है phase अभी. तो वो
okay,
अभी
okay.
I'm over that phase of going. I'm just kidding. No, we do romance. Okay, uh, but yeah, I think I would recommend because I cried when I read Ravinder Singh's I Too Had a Love Story.
Oh,
That is
okay.
one book my husband and I read way back when we were teenagers and we connected over that. So I would
Yeah.
recommend just that.
Okay. One author whose books you were always looking forward to, or you're like always in the keeping up with the news that ये कब नई book लिखेंगे या लिखेगी, either.
Achal Malhotra.
Oh
It has to be
goodness,
Achal Malhotra.
I am in like I had the good fortune of having her on my podcast. She's amazing. She's
Oh,
absolutely
yes.
brilliant. She's like I don't have enough words to praise her. Like her process, her way of approaching things, her empathy, it's
Absolutely.
absolutely fantastic. Okay. One last question before I go. Your favorite international author, now that I have Achal Malhotra on the domestic front.
Um, that actually I read a lot of self-help books also because of
Okay.
I'm interested in the writing process, so there are a lot of writers that I follow. So Anne Lamott is one
Right.
who is on my list, and then I recently discovered what's her name, uh, Anne Patchett.
All
Okay.
right. Right.
So, and she writes both fiction and non-fiction. So, Anne Patchett is one that, I have recently read one of her books, just one,
Right.
and I am hooked to her writing. So, I will be looking forward to whatever that she has written and whatever she is. And then Ali, I don't remember what's her name, Ali Shafak, who has written 40 Rules of Love.
Yep.
And that three basically. So, these are my favorite international authors.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all we have. I think I'll let you go back to your class now. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
doing this with us, Shruti. This was absolutely fun. This was the first time I was collaborating with or working with someone who's not an author or like not talking about a particular book and just talking about reading and people who like to read. This was absolutely wonderful. And please carry on doing this excellent work of what you started with books on the Delhi Metro. I'm a huge fan, honestly, and
Thank you, sir.
yeah, like it's great to see people do this.
Yeah. So thank you, Sid, for having me. It was, like you said, a delightful conversation, and I'm glad that I made time for it, even though
Yeah.
I'm running between classes. Because talking about books is always so refreshing. Earlier, I was like feeling like dozing off because it's an afternoon time, but I really am now more energized. And thank you for a wonderful set of questions. Thank you for a wonderful audience. I hope we can connect sometime later as well to do
Yes.
more amazing things related to books.
Yes, we'll do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye. Bye, everyone.